What's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So today we're gonna see what if DEKU was raised by MADARA UCHIHA instead of INKO. So this story is gonna be very interesting, and if you're new here, please subscribe the channel and also like the video.
The shine of light on the world was an unnatural one. It pierced objects and buildings. All living things ensnared in the illusionary world of their own desires. Sasuke's Rinnegan hadn't been enough to stop him. Using his new eye had cost him too much chakra, and it had been easy for him to tear the boy's Rinnegan out, instantly snaring both him and the Uzumaki in the illusion. Madara Uchiha had won, and he was now paying the price for winning. No movement, no sound. He was alone now, and he was immortal. An eternity of solitude and isolation. If I tear out my Rinnegan eyes and replace them with normal eyes, will I join them in the perfect world? Or will I forever live in this world of pointlessness? Or will I join them but forever feel unable to believe in the illusion? Madara Uchiha, this timeline is ending, and I offer you a choice. The voice was ethereal, barely a whisper, but the silence had made it deafening. My eyes could see no change in chakra, so I wondered if I had gone insane at last. Not insane. Not yet, at least. My name is Gaia, and I am the soul of the multiverse. The being in which all else is born. This timeline is ending. In another life, you failed and died. In this one, you succeeded but now have no purpose. Every human born after this point will only perpetuate under the illusion, and no being can enter this dimensio N without falling prey to it as it reacts to consciousness. I offer a choice. Be reborn in a new world. Be reborn anew. In this world, you were born talented. Born with gifts and powers that allowed you to get this far. You believe that you are more powerful because of your will alone. I challenge you to rise from nothing and become more. The voice was mocking him, and his pride was raised. However, an entire lifetime of battle and consequence have him pause. Pride had cost him his brother, his clan, his home, and many times almost his life. Pride was fickle and dangerous. I don't know your gamer schemes, but I will accept being reborn, with conditions. Such as, in being reborn, I will keep my memories of this life. I will regain my Sharingan and all of my abilities within a period of a decade of rebirth. Any abilities I gain in the new world, I keep. And finally, that you don't interfere with my life or my desires without my permission. I accept those terms. The flat voice echoed, and then blackness was all he knew. OAA. Ever since I can remember, I had nightmares. Horrible, terrifying nightmares that paralyzed me in silent terror. But I could never recall them after I woke up. Only a haze of blood. Bodies everywhere, and feeling the responsibility of knowing I had done those things. And that I liked it. Outside of that, nothing else new. My many tests done on me turned out normal. Sleep tests indicated massive brainwaves, but nothing concrete. I was considered quirkless. In a world where 80% of the world had powers, I had nothing. Until one day, something changed. I had been going somewhere. I no longer remember where. When a slime villain had captured me, suffocated me, intended to kill me, use my body as a puppet. As I neared death and blackness overtook me, my eyes saw red. Red eyes with 3 tomos swirling around the pupil. And a voice that seemed to echo from within me. Would you kindly get out of my body and die? The lazy monotone drawl was cold and flat. Harsh. The sheer coldness in me didn't feel like the slime invading my body. It felt like an ocean of cold energy that flowed through me. The slime suddenly left, and I gasped weakly for air. Sputtering and coughing, I looked up only to see the slime villain was shaking and seemed to be holding something in his hand. The black orb pulsed slightly, and I knew immediately, somehow, that it was the villain's heart. Squelch. A sickening sound of something like a weak splat, and the villain melted. Dead. I was numb. Hollow. I killed him. It was self-defense, but I still killed him. UNKN. Own emotion bubbled up in me as I slowly struggled up to my knees and stared down at the puddle corpse. Glowing red eyes with 3 tomos spun back at me, and a word screamed through my mind in instinctive recognition. Sharingan. Do not fear, for I am late. A distant echo. That voice felt like a lifetime ago. And I looked up from the puddle to see All Might, who looked very worried, and his face barely able to hide his concern. A voice in the back of my mind scoffed. The Sharingan saw and analyzed muscle twitches and movements to the cellular level. There was nothing that can hide from the Sharingan. Your name is Izuku, right? Are you okay? The man's voice was gentle as he went down on his knees. Careful to look at me and not the puddle. I don't know. This thing tried to kill me. It tried to invade my body. And now it's dead. And I feel really tired now. All of that was true, and suddenly the pool of energy in me dried up and all I knew was darkness. For the first time, I knew I wasn't having a nightmare in my sleep. I was recollecting my memories. I was Madara. I was Izuku Midoriya, both of them merging slowly into one individual. Izuku wept at the sheer amount of blood, the sheer amount of bodies, and the horrors of the shinobi world. Madara scowled coldly at the idealistic nature of this new world. Powerful technology, unprecedented abilities as varied and untouched as a tool not yet sharpened. Heroes and villains, black and white, hardly so simple. And yet, he too wept silently in quiet joy. At having family. At having a desire to protect what was not yet tarnished. One experienced all the horrors the world had to offer. The other experienced some of the simple bliss of a modern world that had also proclaimed him useless. Izuku had but one clear desire. A purpose. To be the best hero. To prove to the world that he would rise. Yet he lacked the will to stand against the world, he lacked the conviction to destroy all who stood in his path. Madara had already claimed his purpose. A powerful shinobi, all the strength in the world, but nothing to aim it toward. Nothing outside of a drive to succeed. In every world, in every way, Izuku lost his innocence. Madara reclaimed a better worldview while still retaining himself. All Might had taken the young teen to a nearby hospital. Guilt consuming him. This young man had nearly died in only a strange coup. Urk had saved him from watching another person become another footnote in an obituary. He hadn't meant to be curious, he was still Toshinori in his current state, but he had pulled his weight slightly. To stay in the room and caught sight of the young man's journals. Izuku Midoriya, also known as Worthless Deku. Picked on for being quirkless yet still desired to be a hero. All Might was used to fanboy worship, but not like this. Pages. Endless pages of not just him, but every pro-hero. Their strengths. Endless questions on the limits and variability of their quirks. The sheer extent of his knowledge and ingenuity of his theories put All Might to shame. Izuku may not have a quirk, but he might as well have been. This level of quirk analysis is off the charts. Should any of the villains or worse him get the hands on this boy, would spell doom on everyone. An uneasy feeling hit him. This was the work of years, almost a decade, without a quirk, and now Izuku had a quirk that somehow stopped a dangerous villain that had the ability to be almost entirely liquid and possess bodies like they wore clothes. Was this to be the rise of Izuku the villain? He who could see and destroy heroes on the same level as him. For a brief moment, Toshinori considered killing Izuku. And the fact that the number one hero considered doing that made him pause in self-disgust. Izuku didn't need to be killed. He needed to be guided. He needed to rise, not to strike back against the world and burn it to ashes, but to show the world that all people, quirkless or not, deserve equality. Is he to be my successor? He looked at the young man. He looked so frail. Too frail. One for all would kill him. As he is now, if he trained the young man, if he had the conviction, he might be more than worthy of its power. The young man stirred, and his eyes widened at the sight. Izuku's record-stated green eyes at his birth and childhood. Blood-red eyes with 3 tomo stared back at him. Hello, young Izuku. Those glowing ominous eyes blinked. And then stared at him some more. Who are you? Toshinori sighed. It was going to be a long day. The Sharingan is bullshit in the right hands. Many people use it to memorize jutsu, copy taijutsu styles, and place illusions on their enemies. But that barely scratches the surface. Sharingan is godlike analysis taken to the extreme. No more memory limitations. No more forgetting facts. No more making dumb mistakes after missing an obvious left hook because you were too horny to pay attention. The ability to analyze anything and everything under your gaze. Down to the cellular level. Instantly. His Sharingan could see every muscle twitch. Could see through the man's chest. And he was mildly impressed. Mildly. 50% loss of function in lungs, no stomach. And increased strain on his entire body. His quirks are stockpile, endure, bio-augmentation, and shock energy reversal. Yes, I could now see quirks. Probably cause this world didn't have chakra. Aside from me, my chakra flowed through me if rather weakly. If I had to guess, I had the same levels as when I was 4. 4. Oh, Izuna would be laughing at me. Who are you? His hairstyle, his eyes, and his jaw remind me of All Might. The extensive damage has some implications however. If he's All Might, then I have some troubling thoughts for the near future. I'm Yoshinori, All Might's assistant. He believes you are worthy to invest his time in. Maybe even inherit his quirk. Since it can transfer between individuals. He doesn't appear to be lying. However, my Sharingan detected a very slight hesitance upon saying assistant. So either he is All Might or related to him. However, I'll happily accept his time for training, but I'm afraid I'll have to decline on accepting his quirk. I hardly even know my own quirk's limits. Trying to learn and master both of them would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible. The tone was respectful and calm, but Toshinori looked like someone had slapped him. Maybe after a while you might change your mind, Izuku Midoriya. There's a beach not far from here that is full of junk and has been a trash heap. Part of being a hero is public service. We can train while you clean the beach. I paused. I wondered if I really wanted to deal with this. Dealing with trying to regain my former strength on my own for secrecy or learning the Seker TS of All Might as well as the hero program as a whole. Decisions. Well, I never specified all of my Sharingan's abilities and I did need to test them out. There are already significant differences between this one and his previous set. For instance, his hypnosis no longer required direct contact. Simply tapping his chakra into the slime villain had allowed him to control him. Not to mention that the most he could have done previously was severely injure or confuse his opponents. The brain is very resistant to kill itself and was the main reason the Kurama clan was so feared. Not to mention, his Sharingan can now see and analyze quirks and didn't cost him chakra. His eyes were passively active. As if they no longer required chakra to turn on. He didn't feel the slightest drain from it as he used to even in his youth. This world was so different. 80% of the population has quirks of some variety. All of them with varied utility, skill, and experience. This world had technology that his people would only dream of. This world was both so much greater and weaker than his. But, I realized quietly, it was also my world too. I was both Madara and Izuku. They were one and the same, a quantity greater than the sum of their parts. I'll accept the training. I also might like some more time to get used to my quirk. I winced at the hesitance in my voice. And slightly scowled at the burning frustration. A part of me really wanted to become All Might's successor, but that was tempered by two giant factors. That being that I don't know the full limitations of my Sharingan and that my Chakra is interacting differently in this world. I needed to grasp my footing on what I can and can't do. That, and I silently acknowledged that I could always use the 8 inner gates to boost my Phys. IKAL power much like the stockpile quirk. I can accept that. I'm curious what you can do with it. Any hints? The Not All Might asked and sounded curious. So far, my Sharingan lets me see quirks, analyze what they can do to a certain extent, and slows down the perception of time by a factor of 4, as well as letting me see everything down to the cellular level. So I'm curious how a man who saw he's Not All Might happens to have multiple quirks identical to the man himself. My eyes narrowed as I looked at him. The moment of truth. I can see his jaw gaping slightly, the eyebrows widening in surprise and alarm. And the slight opening of his palms. His neck's very slight movement having jumped indicates a higher heart rate from the accusation. He's All Might. I should get a sticker for surprising him like this. Holy hell. Izuku. That's incredible. From what I read in your journal, you already have quite the analyzing skills, and if what you said is true about your Sharingan quirk, then fast. The man's fist blurred into motion, the stockpile quirk glowing like lightning through the man's body. I had less than a second to react, but my chakra and body responded automatically. Using chakra to switch places with my pillow from behind me, and then simultaneously using my other hand to push back against the headboard of the hospital bed, launching my body slightly higher into the air from its current position. And then drove my foot about 3 centimeters above the pillow. The end result was All Might found himself hitting a pillow, and then immediately seeing the pillow give way to a flying kick to the face. He gaped as he was launched back a few feet onto the ground. He looked up to see Izuku land on his feet on the bed, his legs crouched slightly, and his Sharingan gazing ominously back at him. This is a boy without training. A boy who clearly hasn't gained any muscle mass. A young teen who just dodged my fist at roughly 5% one for all. All Might was stunned and awed. Endeavor himself would have a hard time reacting to a punch like that within 2 feet and while laying down on a hospital bed. All Might himself could do it with one for all, but certainly not in his base form. Izuku Midoriya, you're going to be a terrifying hero by the time I'm done training you. I sincerely think you can be my successor even without one for all. He still wanted to pass on his quirk, as his teacher had done. But he had no qualms in the fact that Izuku in his prime could probably give any one for all successor a run for their money. Easily. Ha ha ha. Izuku, you are magnificent. I can't wait to see you at your peak. Let's get started. I grinned in agreement. My chakra had fallen below half in that one motion. Let's get started indeed. I was less amused to find Mies LF in front of a huge trash heap of a beach. All Might had been quiet on the way to said beach, but now he was grinning wildly at me. These days, heroes love to go around saving people, gathering glory and fame. But before all that, heroes had to learn that being a hero isn't for yourself. He crushed a refrigerator into pieces. Heroes do community service, both big and small, acknowledged or unrewarded, because it's the right thing to do. Many heroes do the little things in the background that are never really noticed. Like my parents who instilled these values in me. Everyone knows All Might, but no one ever asks who inspired All Might. The man was in his inactivated form now, a silent serious tone in his voice. I found myself agreeing to his reasoning. For the next 10 months, you will clean this whole beach. We will train your physical body to its peak, and I originally had a training plan for you, but that goes out the window since we'll also be learning your quirk and how it changes you. Let's get started then, I declared quietly. I took out a paintbrush and some ink pots. What are you doing, Izuku? The man's tone sounded puzzled, and I decided he didn't need to know what every seal was going to do. Just the basics. I am going to write seals on my body. The man's confusion rose silently and I chuckled a bit. He'll see in 10 months. They all will. My eyes narrowed, in burning silent anger as Katsuki popped into my head. They will see what quirkless DEKU can really do. 10 months passed quickly. Very quickly. School was incredibly easy to deal with my Sharingan. I couldn't turn it off anymore. But a simple seal on my forehead turned my eyes green and covered the tomo. As much as I'd love to keep it on at all times, activating my Mangekyo took so much street rain that I couldn't equally concentrate on the seal. Katsuki kept trying to bully and mock me, but that's kinda hard to do when I could use a simple Fuinjutsu to have him think I wasn't in the room. Turns out without the bully leader, the others quickly left me alone. The beach had gotten clean in less than 3 months. Courtesy of my testing my chakra capabilities. Part of maintaining my ability. IEs had been a transfer of all the knowledge of jutsu and seals from my previous life. Some of it was the same, and some of it wasn't. Earth, water, and wind worked same as before. Lightning was subtly different in that it wasn't using seals at all, just using my intent and control to shape it. Fire was the same way. One seal, control to shape, and breathe out to release it. Luckily, I had 2 innate advantages. My seals, and my shadow clones. Yes, I copied that annoying jutsu from Tobirama. I just never expected to need it. In my past life, I had power in spades. Enough chakra to equal Hashirama and decent chakra control. I had perfect chakra control, but so laughably little of it that I could scarcely use the basics. That was 10 months ago. I had enough chakra to equal myself in my early teens, coincidentally my current age. And on top of that was perfect chakra control. I also figured out a good portion of my Sharingan's differences. The eyes are permanently active at base stage. 3 Tomo, Taijutsu, quirk activity, and Genjutsu, though that was far more taxing. Turns out most people are resistant to Genjutsu, likely because the majority of quirks change their brain structure. Which sucked to find out. I could do it, it just took a lot more work. My Mangekyo Sharingan was available, but I struggled to use them. I could use them at most twice a day. Susanoo was at barely ribcage level. For all of 2 minutes. Thankfully my seals helped me far more, or I'd be worried about my frustratingly slow growth rate. Resistance seals, gravity seals, muscle repairing seals, nature chakra absorption seals. And a few other seals did incredible work. Fuinjutsu, limitation, release. The majority of those seals faded and I sighed in satisfaction. Ready, I called out as I smirked. An explosion answered in response. All Might's fist blurred incredibly fast and my main instinct was to dodge with a left roll and counter. My Sharingan spun as I noted the stockpile quirk was really shining through. All Might's fist met my palm and the air itself snapped as the shockwave echoed around us. His eyes widened in shock as I didn't budge. Little hint for you. Tsunade's attack Relia. S's chakra as a mini shockwave upon impact. Using chakra at my palm to create a little pulse at impact as the reverse and absorbs an attack at roughly 10 times its equivalent usage. I barely used any chakra to block this. My other hand blocked his knee, as an equally deadly shockwave echoed around us. A blade imbued with chakra was now at All Might's neck, who flinched at the feeling of cold metal. Yield. The voice was flat, cold, and firm. All Might stared as he saw the one he originally struck had turned into a wooden statue replica, with thick wooden vines holding him in place. A cold shiver went down his spine. He'd used one for all at nearly 15%. And he'd lost. I yield, Izuku. The blade left the man's neck who flexed and broke free instantly. All Might couldn't help but ask. When? I chuckled as I sealed away my short sword. Right after I released my seals and just before saying I was ready. Interesting little factoid, chakra has no mass of its own. It's pure energy. SW. Apping myself with a shadow clone that grew a layer of wood armor was easy. The fact that with a single tap of my heel let me channel chakra and summon said shadow clone behind All Might instantly ONL. Why to swap with it required perfect chakra control, Sharingan precision for timing, and skill. All Might couldn't help but gape at me. I continued to grin maniacally. Well, now it's time to get going to my new school. The place was pretty grandiose and way too visible. Heroes came here to train. It's like asking villains to come by and blow up the place during sessions. I scanned the people around me as we entered inside. Some quirks were frankly garbage, but others had potential. I could only see the quirk, but I needed to see it in action to analyze its strength and applications. I was so busy analyzing other people that I actually almost tripped. Before my other foot could land solidly on the ground, I felt a slight tap on my left arm. The weightless feeling for a tiny moment gave away. What that single tap did is I landed solidly back on ground. I turned to see a cheerful woman remark on how tripping before an exam was bad luck and I thanked her. Outwardly for the save, and inward for more applications of the gravity path. What's your name? I smiled back at her. Izuku Midoriya, at your service. I gave a short slightly silly bow. She giggled as she replied. My name is TCH. Hey, useless Deku. I thought I told you to drop out of applying here. The grating voice of Katsuki caused my blood to boil. I straightened and turned toward him, my eyes glowing in rage. Then an idea popped into my head, and I smiled. It should be noted that in my previous life, my smiles were far worse than my scowls. Shame others didn't appreciate the gesture as much here. Katsuki, how about a bet? You get a single point in this exam and I'll drop out. Hell, I'll cheer for you from the starting line. The arrogant teen's eyes narrowed as he did give a slight sneer at him. And if I don't get a point? My grin faded slightly before I shrugged. Well, then I guess you have to be called Deku. After all, what's more useless than a failed extra who can't even get a single point at the entrance exam? His eyes glowed with rage as he seemed barely restrain himself from throwing himself at me. His hands popped with multiple explosives. He took a single deep breath before snarling. As I'd take a bet over something less than an extra. Piss off, Deku. The teen snarled as he walked past me. The young lady smiled apologetically at me as she also entered the building. My grin widened as my Sharingan recorded everything. My grin widened as I chuckled quietly. Maybe I should take her out to lunch sometime for giving me an idea for the gravity path. The inside was probably even more grandiose than I was thinking of the outside. The man used his quirk to extend his voice as he announced the rules. Which were pretty simple. Destroy robots for scoring points. And no permanent injuring your fellow heroes. That was about it. There was something about a 0-point robot but I hadn't cared to listen to that. Why? Because I was recording all the quirks in the room. Many of them were interesting but not that great. A few were impressive but equally limited. Everyone grouped up next to the door. I stayed toward the back, tapping my foot as I hummed quietly. My Sharingan can't see robots, obviously. But I wasn't too concerned. The starting sound echoed as the huge door slammed open to reveal what seemed to be a huge city block, followed by loud guys shouting for people to move on. Leave for everyone to find themselves stuck. Katsuki snarled as even his explosive sweat was oddly not even starting at all. He felt exposed. He felt Yuzal no. He was way better than him. Fuinjutsu. Multiple body paralysis seal. Katsuki and everyone could only stare as the entire starting circle in front of the door, including their bodies, was now covered in black ink. Katsuki felt sheer fury melt away into cold icy fear as he and everyone else stared up at a glowing red pair of eyes blocking the sun on a wooden platform that broke through the ground. Who's useless now, Katsuki? Izuku Mido. Ria stared down on every exam participant. His green eyes now a glowing ominous red with 3 tomo spinning slightly. The green outfit was gone, replaced by the iconic red armor plate and a gunbai in my left hand. And a wicked sickle coated in lightning chakra in my right hand. I'd love to stay and mock you, Katsuki, but I don't talk to extras. I drawled mockingly as I turned away from him. My eyes closing as I drew forth from my reserves. Deeper, deeper. 75% of my reserves should do the trick. In one life, I was honorable. In one life, I believed in the fairness of others. Shinobi don't fight fair, and certainly don't walk in blind. I've seen countless jutsu before my eyes, but I have to admit, this one was impressive for not quite as much of a cost, if you prepare it right. Across the testing ground, small puffs of smoke appeared as 7 other equally distanced Izukus were now on the edges of the city block built for exams. Lightning style, limelight. 8 beams of electricity collided in the middle of the city block just above everything. Not even half a second later, everything in that zone from the top of the building to just below the simulated road was gone. Not even ashes remained. I fell to my knees, gasping slightly as I chuckled weakly. A bit too much power wasted, and I may have let my arrogance get to me. The loud guy, I think his quirk was microphone, was silent. Indeed, everyone was silent, horrified, or awed. I couldn't tell which. Well, we have a clear winner. Izuku Midoriya, with a whopping 500 points. Every other contestant can come by tomorrow for a retest. The slightly nervous hitch followed by the slight cough was a little frustrating to me. Was I really so terrifying? There was no one else there in the field. I should know. My Sharingan detected nothing and my clones had been there for hours prior. I quietly hopped down the wooden platform I made, looking at everyone as they still stayed frozen in terror. The paralysis seal was already gone. I couldn't concentrate on both simultaneously. Katsuki looked equally terrified and enraged. Evidently his rage won out. What the hell was that? I thought you didn't have a quirk. The teen had yet to take a single step toward me. My frustration snapped slightly as my less than 10% reserves of exhaustion still made itself known as I snapped back. I didn't get my quirk until 11 months ago when a damn villain nearly killed me. I trained 11 months for this exam. I roared back, hissing slightly in anger at the crack in my voice. Katsuki snapped back twice as fast. You did this in 11 months. Heroes have trained their entire lives to do this. Pardon me, but are you sure you weren't training to be a villain, Izuku? I mean, how can heroes clean up or rebuild from ash? The smug yet worried undertone of the man next to Katsuki broke the last of my patience. The young lady whom I'd charmed earlier looked scared, yet she shuffled slightly as she shook. She actually didn't look away even if she was terrified. I was both mildly impressed at her courage and mildly infuriated. This wasn't going anywhere I had wanted it to. And the villain comment burned in my chest like acid. I had lived my life vilified and I knew if I didn't change their opinion now, I'd be trapped in the label. I snarled as I turned away from them. I closed my eyes as I shook slightly. Deeper and deeper. More. All of it. I was really going to regret this in the morning, but so be it. My hands clamped together as my chakra exploded. Creation of all things. Everyone could only watch in awe as the entire city block seemed to melt into existence. The road and the windows. Even the machines, though they were definitely not functional. Izuku. The loud voice was bombastic. And everyone turned to see a huge blur flying through the air as it fell through the ceiling. The blur revealed to be All Might himself, though his posture and face was decidedly in a very concerned expression. All Might had at first been proud. Very proud. Why? A hero doesn't need to be flashy. He needs to know his limits and how to act on information, or on how to gather information. Before his quirk, Toshinori had been one of the smartest men in the quirkless department, back when everyone struggled against villains. His pride turned into anger at the accusations. Did they not understand? If Izuku had been a villain, he'd have let them all walk into the death zone. Buildings can be replaced, people. Not so much. If Izuku had truly been a villain, he'd have killed him at his weakest point with ease. Now, he'd give a talking to Izuku on limiting his pride and use public knowledge to not let other people use him as a scapegoat, but hell. Many heroes never even get to that point in their career. Let alone get to the top 100 spots where that was practically a requirement. His anger gave to extreme concern and horror. Not because the buildings were restored. A few heroes could do that in a few hours, but because he saw the toll it took on Izuku. The young teen's face became really pale, and his eyes, the boy's own treasure that gave him his advantage, began to bleed. He didn't even stop to consider his actions. He moved. All Might grabbed onto Izuku, wincing at how fragile he felt to him. The young man was always so prideful. So strong-willed. It felt like such a wrong thing to see him so limp and exhausted. He gently felt the young man's pulse and sighed at the strong heartbeat that was steady. Izuku would need to go back to infirmary to be taken care of for closer look. But he seemed in the clear. The rest of the examination group could only stare at the number one hero holding onto the young teen who had both reduced the entire FAL Say City block to dust and brought it back. Even Katsuki was silent. All Might's voice was still loud, but harsher. Angry. Blistering. Not quite yelling, but it boiled across them all. How dare you all judge this young man? He saved your lives by keeping you away from the arena. Many heroes when they start off are not as careful as he had been. I've seen him train from someone who could Selly fight off a simple mugger to fight me for half a minute, and he has trained so hard that I made him my personal successor in all but name. Do you think you could do the same? All Might's glowing blue eyes glared down at them all. They were frozen stiff in fear, and he knew that this was not what a symbol of peace would do. But sometimes people needed to be reminded that heroes are people too, and that people sometimes need to stop pushing and learn to fucking listen. One of the girls, the one who had a gravity quirk, his mind supplied quietly, shook as she spoke up quietly. We didn't ask him to do this. I am sorry he's hurt though. All Might softened slightly, sighing quietly. He was never the best with kids, though he did like their clear-minded enthusiasm. Here's a very important lesson for you all. Heroes don't fight for the glory, or for the money, or the fame. We fight and do things because we earnestly believe it's the right thing to do. And so long as our beliefs don't hurt anyone, we strive to follow on what we believe is right. Izuku is a protector. He'd save each and every one of you. Even if he didn't like you. Because that's him. That's who he is, and that's how I am. So it hurts to feel the ones you protect turn on you. Explosive Quirk Boy looked really angry at the notion of being protected, and All Might's face hardened as he glared down at him. Heroes don't fight to destroy things. We're not mindless things looking for a fight. And if I hear a single rumor of you picking a fight with Izuku or mocking him, you will regret it. All Might tapped his foot on the ground. And a large chasm cracked into existence a few feet from them all. The teen nodded sullenly, his face still frustrated but subdued. Good. He turned and left to take Izuku to the infirmary. He wondered if Izuku would hate hospitals as much as he did. Chapter end. Hope you guys enjoyed this chapter. Smiley face. This one took me a while cause I have workin' with COVID-19 also throwing things for a loop. To be honest, I'm still concerned for everyone, especially cause my girlfriend works in the medical field. So, everyone stay safe and stay inside if you can. Smiley face. Sad part is, I'm terrible at names and just got into My Hero Academia, so I apologize. It's a work in progress. Review if you like. Smiley face. I hate hospitals. With everyone fussing over you, to the annoying medics who often acted like Kami's gift to Shinobi. To the Kami be damned scratchy bedsheets. Naturally, I immediately shot out of the bed with ease, using chakra to propel myself into a mid-air roll and landing on solid ground feet first. I noted the multiple doctors staring and one of them began to walk up to me with a scowl. No. Hell no. Izuku. I turned to see All Might, in his inactive form, watching me warily. You alright? I sighed, my stance relaxing slightly. I hate hospitals. The man grinned and nodded in sympathy. How are your eyes? They were bleeding earlier. Such concern is a little over the top, I drawled mentally, but appreciated. I guess. Only from you and Mom. My quirk has many abilities, but the ones that can change huge landscapes or often require tremendous action take a toll on my body and more specifically my eyes. It's not permanent, but it can take a while to recover. It's more powerful than my body can handle. For now. All Might nodded in understanding. One for All has a similar toll on one's body. How do you intend to grow further from here? Indeed. I had pushed my body to reclaim some of my former strength and abilities, but this body was inherently more agility than brute force. And I was struggling against the more fragile limitations. Perfected chakra control with a glass ceiling. Not that I intended to live with such a thing, naturally. Pure training has yielded plenty of results. But I think I need a different spin on things from this point forward. Brute force training doesn't work well when my body is beholden to more limitations. Even chakra can only take me so far. Luckily for me, there are other avenues for growth. Knowledge is power. The more knowledge and understanding I have of the world around me, the more I can do. I spoke quietly to myself as I looked down at the ground. Contemplating. Well then, Izuku, I can tell you that the alma mater I went to is open to you. So is every other hero school. You did get a perfect score. True. Knowledge of my allies. Deeper history. Even more knowledge to forward my growth. This all sounded great, but there were a few ringing bells. Namely, how obvious that security measure would be. Be a reporter. Or have someone take over security measures, and the villains have the data on every hero. Teacher, student, faculty, all becoming hostages. Why would I want to join such a place with such a huge flaw? Because. A familiar darker tone echoed in my head. Villains will flock to wherever you go. They will seek you out to exploit your power or eliminate you. Villains that you can then trap inside your area of choice. Their ambush in reality would become their tomb. And I would gain all the experience I could ever want. I see. I can accept going to your school. However, I will admit that I'd like to go home. This hospital irritates me. Like being wrapped in a scratchy blanket. All Might chuckled, nodding in understanding. The exam results come out in a week. They had a retest the day after you annihilated the city block. Quote. I frowned. I did bring it back. And they had to replace the machines. The insides were practically empty husks of metal. Whatever you did doesn't react well to technology. I got released from the hospital. Even if no less than 3 doctors with specialized quirks checked on me, wondering how I regained my previous vitality so quickly and why my blood samples pretty much got destroyed instantly after leaving my body. Like hell, I'll let anyone use my blood for anything. Especially not in a world of quirks. For all I know, there could be a villain who could kill me with a drop of blood. Mom freaked out and was inconsolable for a few minutes, but I calmed her down with a subtle chakra technique. A medical calming jutsu for patients going into shock. All Might left after admonishing me quietly on letting the graduation class get to me and that he was still proud that I didn't let anyone enter the zone of destruction. The warm feeling of his acceptance and pride in me made me equally pleased and irritable. Madara Uchiha had no such care for the opinions of others, but Izuku Midoriya was a young teen who craves acceptance of his peers. Izuku Midoriya. The calm cold tone echoing from my bedroom window made me immediately turn into combat mode. My Sharingan glowed in the darkness as I looked at my enemy who had somehow escaped my sensor abilities. My eyes widened. Dozens of quirks floated in the man's chest. Quirk recognition, endurance, body adjustment, steel quirks, acclimation, energy nullification, shock repulsion, regeneration, give quirks. Life extension, life absorption, stasis, levitation, forever alone, forever mocked for not having a quirk, considered less than dirt, until you killed a villain in self-defense. The man's own presence seemed to freeze my blood. I could feel my heart pumping, the cold icy feeling in my stomach growing wider. A distant part of me roared to not let my guard down. The man moved and I reacted. His hand blurred toward me so fast even my Sharingan could barely detect the motion. My mind exploded into reaction as I instantly reacted subconsciously. I see. I found myself behind the man, my Hakra having me switch places with an instantly summoned clone that I had made subconsciously at the moment of movement. My clone lived for less than an instant as I felt the clone's very existence melt apart. Energy nullification affected jutsu. You can create clones of yourself and switch places with them. They use energy as the basis of creation, which is why they instantly disappear upon contact with me. Whatever ability you have is not a quirk as I could not sense it. The smooth cold voice echoed in the silence as the man turned to face me once more. My heart was pounding so harshly. I wasn't ready to face this man. He could nullify jutsu and he could move as fast as the man that had used all 8 gates. I was far from ready, but I will not back down. I can't. Either I die in fear, or I die standing. I guess if you're going to kill me, that I should stop holding back, huh? My comment was sarcastic and angry. I wasn't ready. My body wasn't ready. I doubted I could match this man even with every tool I had in my disposal, but damn it I would try. Fuinjutsu. Natural limitation. Release. The man blurred toward me once more. His hand reached like a gaping void. I could see multiple quirks glowing brightly in his chest. A black rod stabbed through his hand and jerked it away from my neck, my hand effortlessly forcing it away as my chakra surged through the rod as I gazed through him. All for One had killed many heroes, many people. Taken their quirks. Relished in that taking. His power, to originally steal and give quirks, had made him powerful. At first he'd been kind. But the many years in the shadows had shown him humanity was unworthy of their gifts. He let them grow, enjoying the challenge from the more powerful ones. One for All was just another way to pass the time. To test himself and humanity. To become stronger on his own or let the stockpile quirk grow until it consumes the person. He wondered if All Might was aware of how horrible that quirk actually was. If he'd dare to pass it on if he knew the real cost. Cold, dark, endless, undying, eternal, pressure. All for One had a quirk, Mind Wall, that protected him from any mental quirks. And he LD still feel the horrible unending pressure. The feeling of God looking upon him and finding him unworthy. In less than an instant, All for One roared as he slammed his other hand through Izuku's chest and crushed his heart. Immediately, he tore out the black rod and tossed the boy's corpse aside. He originally came here with an offer, and now he found himself unsettled by what he had felt. Whispers. Whispers of a myth. A fragmentary tale. One that was hushed up. One that had been considered a fairy tale by many. Only in oral records had that tale survived. But all myths had their truths, and All for One was worried. As this myth had been in almost every culture he'd traveled upon aside from island nations like this one. He had purple ringed eyes. In the beginning, mankind had a power that was entirely their own. A power that has no name. A power that was beyond any quirk. Humanity had turned upon each other with their power. One man rose above the rest, first with eyes of red and then eyes of ringed purple. And found humanity unworthy. And so he stripped them of their power. Less than a fragment of it remained. That fragment grew to become quirks. However, a god cannot be killed. This is a moot point. All for One spoke quietly to himself before shaking his head and leaving the bedroom through the window as if the window hadn't existed for him. An hour had passed, and then a choking laugh echoed. The air stilled and the area trembled. Space bent and time stuttered. The long cold corpse glowed an unnatural blue light, and then melted away. That bastard killed me. Ha 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 ha. I can't wait to dance with him again. One eye was purple with rings and the other was a pale milky white. Blind. The young teen chuckled darkly as he rose a hand over his blind eye. Creation of all things. A brief pulse and the hand was removed to reveal the same ringed pattern as its counterpart. A bonsai tree, small and trimmed on the windowsill, grew single long thin branch that changed into a fully grown wooden shadow duplicate of Izuku, one that had been watching the whole event. The duplicate reached out to Izuku, and poured energy into him. The cold warmth of chakra was tinged with something. The clone crumbled away and Izuku howled darkly with insane laughter. Ha 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 ha. I must really thank him for the song and dance. It's a shame I can't kill him yet. In due time. In due time. First, I will break his organization. His peers. His followers. His disciples. His students. All of them will burn. Izuku's eyes glowed with an ominous intent. His chest burned and energy exploded. He looked in the mirror and grinned with a dark madness. For in the mirror, his chest glowed with all the quirks that All for One had. What does one say to the powers of a god? How does one react? How do you quantify a response? That day had been life-changing, in subtle yet undeniable ways. All Might had never said he'd trained anyone before. Nor, that the trainee could grow at such a fast pace. Izuku Midoriya. Age, 15. Sex, male. Hair color, dark green, almost black, and hair quite long. Wore metal armor upon the examination. Was able to restrict the movement of over 30 individuals with various quirks from what appears to be instantaneously formed markings on the ground. Tests show no created evidence or any residue remaining. Able to create a lightning-based attack that pulverized an entire city block with everyone within it, and then reversed his destruction at the cost of blood coming from his eyes and becoming unconscious for a few hours. Subject samples were destroyed upon removal, whether conscious, unconscious or otherwise. No machines were functional aside from the heart monitor on the chest. That kind of power to appear out of nowhere was both unprecedented and horrifying. Quirks can bend the rules of science, but cannot break them. Energy must come from somewhere. Matter must be formed from something else. Those were one of the few rules that even quirks needed to abide by. Until now, to most of the world, nothing had changed. Izuku was a powerful but young hero. A powerful quirk user, but otherwise harmless. To certain factions, Izuku Midoriya had become the catalyst for an arms race between agencies and entities both known and unknown. The League of Villains had been quite ecstatic at the idea of such a quirk user, sure enough announcing that Izuku would be welcomed with open arms if he got tired of being bullied and ignored for his villainous quirk. The Hero Alliance had been just as quick to fire out that a person's quirk didn't make them evil. Only their actions and intentions did that. That Izuku recreated the city block pointed out that the young teen was able and willing to do good with his power. Governmental agencies were nervous. In many secret organizations where the light never showed, many aspiring quirk users and, experimentally created users, were frothing at the mouth. For good reason. It took the rulebook of quirk laws and abilities and threw it straight into a burning dumpster fire. That made Izuku Midoriya an unknown with a very powerful quirk who had very little psychological profile to go off of. Considering his previous one as a meek quirkless boy as a cover story for the brimming powerful confident individual that he actually was. Those whose quirks could see the future in the long-term capacity went insane. The few individuals who had been hunted down tirelessly and collected by various agencies and entities, had all quite literally gone insane on that examination day. They babbled and moaned about the moon glowing blood red and then died. Except one. A young woman born in a facility unmarked and unnamed yet belonging to a very powerful faction, was moaning in ecstasy as every other quirk user of her type died. The researchers threatened and cajoled and did everything to get her to talk, but she'd simply smile silently at them, her blind eyes seeing through them at whatever vision she saw. She won't speak and my mental quirks won't reach her mind. She's gone insane, but still alive. All for One snarled in frustration and released his grip on her arm. Of the many quirks he wielded and mastered, he refused to touch quirks that dealt with the future. Too many variables, and he personally believed in making reality as he saw it into being made by his own hands. The doctor besides him scoffed quietly. All for One had been tempted to kill him many times, but this man was the sole researcher and developer of his Nomus. It doesn't matter. We can always just create Nomus who can crush this young Midoriya. What I'd give to study his brain and eyes. The doctor cackled. All for One was silent. He was tempted to tell him that he had killed Midoriya already, but had no desire or need to do so. What was he to care for the dead now gone? Even if he had been a potential recruit, it mattered little to him now. Though he regretted not having been able to extend the offer aside from his rash actions. The woman moaned quietly, her pale blind eyes glowing slightly in the darkness. Izanagi, what is the price to be paid for the power to rewrite reality? Just Oving your eyesight in one eye that can be returned with another jutsu or transplanted with medical surgery. No. Izanagi was made of forbidden kinjutsu because of what it causes as a side effect to everyone else, not just the user. The memories of the user, their existence and their personal lives, were removed after death. The name might remain if you had a substantial pull over history, but the personal beliefs, the ideas, the values of that person, gone. To use Izanagi was to stand for but a microsecond against the tides of fate, and the price was to be withered down to nothing after you are gone. Your parents will remember you as their own. Your brothers will remember you if you had a deep impact upon them. But your clan, your family, history, will move on as if you never existed. That was the price. It was never worth it. For whom will remember your sacrifice? For whom will mourn you? For whom will remember you after you are gone? I only used it because my Rinnegan could nullify the effects of Izanagi. Mostly. Mom had been horrified to find she had only set one plate on the table and had burst into tears, wondering why she had forgotten her sweet boy. My nickname, Ghost of the Uchiha clan, was due to the fact that I used Izanagi to save the clan from certain extinction, twice. Utilizing the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, I couldn't lose my eyesight from using the technique as long as I had enough chakra to activate the technique in both eyes, which I lacked for now. The quirks I had obtained from copying All for One were, in a way, incomplete. I possessed the quirks, but no knowledge on how to use them at the same proficiency. No doubt if I tried, I'd get barely any results. While some were passive, others took a lifetime to learn. I didn't like using techniques I didn't know or see in their entirety with the Sharingan, so I'll forego most of them for now. If anything, I'll hone my other skills until it's time for my debut in Ultra Academy. Personally, I can't wait to see what All for One's reactions will be to my survival. If anything, it was even more awkward when All Might arrived looking like someone had killed his puppy. Izuku, thank goodness you're alright. I thought a powerful villain somehow erased you from existence. I sighed and then smirked up at him. My Sharingan glowed ominously in the morning sun. I'd like to see them try. All Might laughed loudly in response, shaking his head slightly as he handed me the official paperwork for registration to get inside Ultra Academy. A quick scan confirmed for me what I already suspected: classes stead from roughly 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon with an hour lunch. Classes were divided not by history or exams, but different aspects of being a hero. Laws and enforcement, protocol recognition and the boring like combat training and survival learning, which I was excited for, and a class for support and medic training. Not bad, but it seemed a little too clinical, and my suspicion was raised at how varied the times each class had. Laws and enforcement took up a huge portion of the day, even compared to combat. Thinking about it, I was frustrated to realize what was probably obvious to most people in this world. They limited their heroes, limited them on what they could and couldn't do, limited their potential on rules and regulations. Which would be fine, if villains were ever inclined to follow the same rules. As if. I nodded to All Might absent-mindedly as I walked toward the building, as I had been completing the paperwork in silence on the way there. What use is all the power in the world, if they were restrained by laws and legal debate? The Uchiha in me scoffed at the idea of following anyone's rules from my own. The Midoriya side acknowledged that without rules, only chaos would remain. A compromise, I suppose. If the rules made sense, I'd abide. If they didn't, then this world would see the unstoppable mountain that I had been before and will become again. I turned in my paperwork, acknowledged the clerk whose quirk had been speed reading, and moved on. The classroom was a buzz full of noise and I was frankly annoyed to see no one had acknowledged the yellow bag on the floor closest to the door. Who had a quirk? Quirk suppression. I raised one foot and slammed it down against the floor. There was a surprising amount of resistance to my wood style. My guess was a material made of dense steel to deal with the various quirk abilities of the staff and students. I tore through it like butter. The wood exploded out of the ground, ring through the yellow sleeping bag and ensnared the man within. The man gasped and struggled, his quirk glowing as the cloth flew from around his neck toward me. I raised a hand, my eyes unconsciously shifting into the Rinnegan. The cloak froze and coiled in the air like a snake, struggling to find purchase from the power of my gravity well. The man's red eyes glowed as he seemed to scowl. He Was about to speak when my wood grew and gagged his mouth shut. My. Quirk suppression and hidden in front of the door. If you wanted to ambush or kidnap us, that's a good way to do it. However, my hand clenched into a fist and the cloth was torn out from around his neck and clenched into a very tight ball. The man's eyes widened in concern and shock. I wonder if you did your research. The cloak fell to the floor and the wood style released the man, who gasped as he fell to his knees. He quickly stood up and his eyes glowed as the balled-up cloak returned to him. Izuku Midoriya. What a problem, child. The man's voice was soft and annoyed. I'm your homeroom teacher. Follow me outside for your first examination. The man left the room, carefully walking around the wood as he called out loudly. Clean that up, Midoriya. I shrugged and placed my hand on the wood, which slowly faded and sucked back into chakra. All that remained was a hole in the floor, which I ignored. The rest of the class was silent and somewhat fearful. Ochako came and said hi quietly to me, which I returned, but no one else said a word. I was annoyed and ignored Katsuki's word vomit. He wasn't worth my time. The girl with a frog-like quirk said quietly. Midoriya is scary, Kiro. She riveted quietly. I easily responded. Only to my enemies. Otherwise, I'm as normal as it gets. She squeaked. Shihon. Streetly hadn't thought I heard her from across the classroom. I poked my left ear, referencing that part of my quirk was advanced hearing. Is there anything your quirk can't do, Kiro? She said this at the same tone as before. I'm not sure. My quirk is energy-based with a focus on my eyes as its primary, but I'm sure there are limits. I shrugged in response. The class was less stifled now. Atsuki grumbling darkly in the corner while Ochako nodded slightly. She seemed nervous, actually. More nervous than the rest. I didn't know why. She whispered quietly, much softer than even the frog quirk user. His eyes are pretty. My left eye twitched. The Uchiha in me was absolutely affronted that the legendary deadly eyes I wielded were considered pretty. The Midoriya in me was pleased that a girl complimented me. Focus, Izuku. I chid myself. Enemies could be here even now. We went outside, where the man, apparently now in a cloaked black shirt and jeans now, stood calmly. My name is Aizawa. Normally I'd go through this boring speech about what you should act as heroes. Unfortunately for you, someone decided to be a show-off. Aizawa glared at me and I decided to be a smug asshole. I smirked and waved back at him. His glare hardened before he sighed. The hero exam is more than just crushing robots and saving people. It's an examination of your abilities. Today I'll be pairing you all against each other. Those in the last 5 spots are expelled immediately. Midoriya, use your quirk to launch this baseball as far as you can. He threw a plain baseball at me. I grabbed out the air as I leapt down next to him as I looked out into the open air space. I could use my Rinnegan to accelerate the ball with pure gravity, but honestly, I just felt like having fun. Let's get wild. My grin widened as I felt my chakra surge. I tossed the ball up casually, where it flew a few feet up in the air as I blew out the air through my mouth. Wind style, projectile acceleration. The air moved so fast that it made a loud snapping sound, the ball exploding forward and into the air. It flew until it couldn't be seen by normal eyes. My Sharingan could see it, but that was more so my chakra lingering very slightly on the ball itself. That would fade in a few moments. I asked lightly, smirking. So, what happens if the ball hits the spatial barrier against the atmosphere? Aizawa sighed. Infinite. Pass. Go sit down, you arrogant brat. I shrugged, going back to sit next to Ochako, nodding to her look of awe and slight dismay. The rest of the class was silent, but Frog Girl riveted. Izuku is scary, Kiro. Katsuki looked outraged and unhappy. He was looking down at his hands, the mini sparks of explosives absent. My Sharingan could see his reaction. His true reaction. Katsuki was a lot like Naruto. I acknowledge grudgingly. He didn't have his pure heart or his potential. No, but he does have the drive to success and constantly feels powerless. His powerless feelings manifested as rage and anger. Contempt to the weak is contempt to his weaker self. If Katsuki had the QB, the boy would be constantly erupting in the malevolent hate of the Biju's chakra, I noted wryly. The rest of the class took turns with the ball, Ochako going last. Before she went up, I poked her nose teasingly. Her nervousness vanished as she squeaked, her eyes glancing confused toward me. I smirked as I pointed at her hand. You can remove gravity from an object. Gravity is what keeps us on the earth. Get the idea? Ochako looked confused but nodded hesitantly. Ochako went down and grabbed the ball. Aizawa gave her a slow, rather bored, nod. My Sharingan instantly shifted into the eternal Mangekyo. I wanted every microsecond of this to be recorded. Ochako's quirk didn't just affect gravity. It had a noticeable effect on friction. Her nausea is her accidentally applying the frictionless and gravityless process to herself on a much smaller level. Ochako looked back at me, her gaze confused and worried. I gave her a nod and a smirk. You got this. She nodded, taking a deep breath, before she affirmed her stance. She tapped the ball with a finger, and threw it as hard as she could. Force equals mass times acceleration. Ochako can move and act fairly well in nominal conditions. No gravity and lowered friction normally means the object doesn't lose force, constantly moving at the same rate. Unless you apply wind. The higher up you go, the faster winds move. So the rest of the class looked odd and horrified to see the small baseball launch itself high into the air, and then abruptly blur out of sight. Ochako gasped as she muttered, "I don't feel nauseous." She looked confused. I elaborated, "You control gravity through your touch. Every time you accidentally use your whole hand, you're likely using too much of the special quirk skin cells. The result is nausea. I thought using a finger might help more." She gaped at me. How did you? I smirked. Back at the entrance exam. Before the exam building, you touched me and released me almost in seconds. Afterwards, I realized you didn't seem nauseous. You tapped me with a few fingers, not your whole hand. Ochako looked starstruck. The rest of the class was floored. Aizawa sighed. So the arrogant problem child can see details. Great. We're moving on now. The next step was a strength challenge, in one where you hit as hard as possible and lifted as much as you could. I went first again. It seemed our homeroom teacher wanted me out of the way. I had chakra control to use Tsunade's technique. But there are other less costly abilities. I looked at the huge black metal plate in front of me and scoffed. Earth style. Greater impact. I slammed my fist into the plate, my skin now a black color as my chakra rushed through me. The plate cracked and exploded into shards of metal no bigger than a finger, as did the 4 plates behind the first one. This technique was a counter to Hashirama's summoning gate walls, the Rashomon. The 6th plate had severe cracks throughout it, but it held. Aizawa coughed lightly, his eyes looking at the damage. He muttered, "Problem child. Average strike of 5 tons. I shrugged as I released the technique. The rest of the class continued, with Ochako really struggling to do anything to the black plates of dense metal. Katsuki attempted to explode the metal plate with his fist, but was surprised to find himself flying back a few feet. My Sharingan recorded the whole thing, my eyes narrowing at the realization that the metal itself was far too dense to be damaged from his weaker explosions. His stronger explosions would likely put everyone around him at risk. The next test was a speed test, one that was both a 50 and 300 feet-meter run. The 50 was pure speed per second. But the 300 was a 3-lap course, adjusting for longer times and natural longer movements. The 50-meter was easily done, blurring through the air in roughly 3 seconds using the basic rapid movement technique. Aizawa looked annoyed at me as I continued to nearly outshine the class. I didn't really care, aside from slowly chatting and relaxing with Ochako and Frog Quirk Girl. I still didn't know her name. I'm considering asking it after the whole examination is over. The 3 laps were interesting, Katsuki using his controlled explosions to launch himself repeatedly through the air, having to adjust for his movement speed when he accidentally launched himself too far. Engine Quirk user was doing extremely well, having completed over a third of the first lap in 1 second. Lightning style. Lightning armor. Gate 1, open. Electricity crackled around my frame, bluish energy sparking around the air near me. I moved, blurring instantly as I overtook the engine Quirk user and then completed the remaining laps in less than 10 seconds. I quickly deactivated both techniques, sighing as I relished in the semi-basic healing energy that Hashirama's Mokuton gave me. Truth be told, without the Mokuton, I likely wouldn't have been able to abuse my abilities like I had been. The engine Quirk user looked pleased and frustrated that he beat the class but lost to me. He looked hesitantly curious. What was that, Midoriya-san? I grinned. My quirk's energy seems to derive itself from 7 elemental components: lightning, earth, water, fire, air, light, and dark. Using lightning to enhance my muscles and nerve reaction time means I move 4 times my normal speed. The teenager's mouth gaped as he stared at me before he grumbled. Lucky. I shrugged. It takes work to do. What you're seeing was easily 24/7, almost a full year of work. I think I slept maybe 4 hours a night, on the nights I did sleep. Aizawa called out, "Problem child, you can burn yourself out that way." His voice was casual yet blunt in his honesty. I shrugged again as I looked back at him, my Sharingan spinning lazily. I've needed less and less sleep after my quirk activated. Obviously. Chakra is pure vitality. The essence of pure energy converted for human use. The more chakra you had, the more available energy. In children, this made them extremely hyper, unable to concentrate or focus. Excess energy needed an outlet, and the human body could only contain so much. In adults, excess chakra could actually kill you. Too much excess energy could cause heart attacks, destro. Why the very structure of the circulatory system, and even destroy your chakra coils. That's the main reason the 8 gates killed their users, forceful conversion of their own biomass into pure chakra. Hashirama and I were one of a very small handful of individuals to have been essentially born lucky. Excess chakra didn't destroy the body in us, instead it forced faster growth and maturation of their chakra coils. The Uzumaki clan as a whole had a similar mutation, but with the unfortunate twist of it only giving higher vitality and chakra, not growth as a whole. I breathed deeply, focusing inwards on my chakra coils. Feeling them out. Ever since the usage of Izanagi, my chakra coils had more than quadrupled in size and structure. Perhaps Izanagi had inadvertently expanded and increased my growth. While active quirks would likely take months or years to learn and master, passive quirks were quite useful. Mind wall, life extension, stabilization, energy nullification, stasis, sense evil. To be honest, a good chunk of these quirks were already useless, as the Rinnegan had many of these abilities and more, but the usage of these quirks were fantastic because, as I had just realized, the Rinnegan stabilized and altered the quirks in question, as well as the added bonus of these passive quirks being used even without the Rinnegan awakened. Mind Wall was untouched, being a passive Q. Yerk that blocks all mind-based quirks on him. Life extension simply expanded his lifespan, but his Rinnegan had altered that to include expanding his life energy, his chakra as a whole. Even now he could feel the quirk passively increasing his coils. He reckoned in roughly 10 or so years, he'd have the same chakra as he did in his final stages of life. Stabilization was an odd one. All the quirk initially did was stabilize himself, keeping him from being knocked off balance by another quirk. The Rinnegan didn't touch up this one either. Energy nullification was the real prize. Initially, it would have been a hindrance, destroying his ability to utilize ninjutsu or chakra-based abilities within a few feet of himself. Now, he could actively choose which energy-based abilities to nullify, actively excluding chakra from the list. Stasis is similar but separate to life extension. Stasis meant he could hold his body in a certain state passively, in this case the quirk could hold him at a certain stage of his life. With the Rinnegan, he could now actively change his growth rate. Useful if he needed to scout as an old man, or as a young child to sneak into territory without altering his abilities. Sense evil was a strange one. Initially, all it did was allow you to sense the intentions of others toward yourself. The Rinnegan had massively overhauled this, essentially making him able to sense the darker thoughts of others around him within a 3-mile radius. This would normally drive others insane, but he had an entire lifetime of war and espionage to fall back on. And then, the real prize, the ultimate gem. Stockpile. The ability to accumulate energy. Originally, this quirk was useless on its own, most likely paired with All for One's active quirks to gather multiple quirks into single combined abilities and synergize seamlessly with his main quirk. Interestingly, this quirk was identical to the one All Might had, which made me question if All Might obtained this quirk from All for One. Or if All Might had the quirk as an inheritance quirk passed down his bloodline. I chuckled darkly. The ability to accumulate energy was no joke in its own right. In the hands of All Might, the man could alter the weather with a single punch. In my hands, the quirk itself was altered. Now I had no capacity limit. My chakra coils could expand effectively forever, I could gain strength indefinitely. I had no ceiling of human potential nor human growth. Aizawa's eyes narrowed as he looked into mine, his red eyes glowing ominously into my own as he seemed to see something that put him on edge. If the home teacher wants to test my limits, why not oblige the man? I could use a warm-up. Midoriya, survive. Aizawa's drawl ended in a cold tone, as he suddenly sprinted at me, his blade extended for my throat. Eraserhead Pav. Tisk. Asking All Might and a few other heroes to try and catch the problem child off guard to test his limits was an annoyance, but the lack of limits, the versatility, and frankly, the dangerous combat-focused abilities the young man had meant that they needed a deeper understanding of what he could and couldn't do in order to teach the child humility. And more importantly, so he could see that he couldn't rely only on himself. Aiming the blade at the young man's neck, the blade's edge was blunted and wouldn't do more than bruise the young man. All Might appeared from above. His elbow aimed down at Midoriya. Kamui was behind the young man, roughly 15 feet away, and had his wood extension quirk rushing at the young man from behind. And then the whole plan went to shit. Midoriya's eyes gazed at me, his cold glowing three tomos shifting into a different design, and then turned a reddish purple, with rings appearing around the whole eye itself. Tomo designs appearing on the rings themselves. Limbo. His blade was blocked instantly, an invisible presence slamming hard into his stomach and Aizawa couldn't even draw a breath from the impact before he was slammed to the ground, an invisible cold hand on his throat. Kamui didn't fare much better, the wooden tendrils having rotted apart instantly as the young hero was knocked out instantly by a similar presence. All Might was frozen in mid-air, literally. Ice hissed and cracked into the air, thick sheets of ice that shouldn't have been possible, and even All Might was unnerved by the fact that said sheets appeared instantly. At 50% one for all, the ice didn't even buckle under the intense physical energy. Aizawa drew in a shaky breath as he was hauled up, looking into Midoriya's eyes. He fucked up. The problem child didn't even move, his confidence and arrogance unshaken. Reality is what people believe it to be. If our senses cannot be trusted, what does it mean? Reality itself can be fractured by what you think is or isn't real. The young teen faded away like an illusion, a much broader and more physically fit older man taking Midoriya's place. Pure black hair shifted in a silent wind. The world frozen in suspension. The sky was black, and a blood-red moon hung impossibly large over the scene. My name is MADARA Uchiha, and I am the man who became a god. Now, be gone. The whole vision fractured like glass, and Aizawa found himself feeling vertigo as he was apparently in front of the class, after having told them that no one would be expelled. He was shaken. Was what happened real? Was it an illusion brought by his fear of the young prodigy going villain and rogue? Could his brain even create such an intense fiction? His erasure quirk didn't work earlier against the young prodigy either. Was the young man a new mutant type of quirk user? He shook his head, exhausted and drained as he dismissed the class, ignoring the way the young problem child looked bemused. Bah, he didn't get paid enough for this. Izuku Pav. Well, that was fun. I had cast a mid-tier genjutsu on the teacher. Both to learn of his quirk and how it functioned, as well as get a deeper understanding of how he operates. Not bad, reminds me of some of my more paranoid clan members. As the class filed out and had me as their representative, much to Katsuki's growing ire. I was surprised once we arrived at the cafeteria that the sound system went off. Attention. Security breach level 3. Please walk calmly and quickly to the nearest available exits. The rest of the students looked ready to freak out. My Sharingan noting the fear and concern on everyone's faces. I sighed. These were the professional heroes of tomorrow. Definitely need to get used to the unexpected. That said, I had no desire to deal with a panicked mob and/or a riot. Pressure. The whole room stood still, as everyone felt the immense pressure and coldness exuding from Izuku Midoriya. The red Sharingan spinning coldly as he announced firmly. Be at ease and be attentive. We're all here to become heroes. We are no longer civilians. We cannot panic. Think calmly, think proactively. Move forward. Art in 2 file lines toward the emergency exits and do not trample one another. I sighed, watching as everyone moved calmly and quietly. I was one of the last to leave, surprised to find that Ochako had looked starstruck at my calm authority and frog quirk user croaked. appreciatively at the fact that I represented the class well in the unexpected crisis. That was mostly an uneventful day, although I had finally learned the frog quirk user's name. Suyu Asui. Apparently most didn't see past her deadpan expression and how flatly she spoke, even as she spoke her mind constantly and freely. Dealing with the ever-stoic Huga, however, she was absolutely refreshing to work with by comparison. Mina Ishido, Mina as I'll refer to her, had the quirk acid formation, being able to create acid from her skin. Her pink skin and unique features were also a side effect of her quirk, being extremely resistant to her own acidic creations, though not immune to them in the long term. Momo Yaoyazoru, frankly just Momo, had the ability to create items or machinery as long as she had the exact atomic design memorized, using the same elements she absorbed through her food and drink. It was similar to creation of all things, at a much more limited scale. She expressly admitted feeling overshown when I had recreated the entire city block in an instant. I had dryly pointed out that the cost had been unconsciousness and blind for a few hours even after waking up. To be fair, the blindness was a lie, but she didn't need to know that. The stunned silence from her and a rather dry, "Yeah, I'm good now," response a minute later helped her feel better about herself. Toru Hagakuri, Toru for short, was a woman dressed in the school uniform. Her quirk, an inherited one apparently, was that she was invisible. Or rather, was supposed to be invisible. I had blankly admitted that I could see her easily and freely, due to my Sharingan. She had looked stunned and had asked me how that was possible. Her cells weren't technically invisible. Rather, her cells were able to manipulate the way light refracted around each other. By being able to do so, she could simultaneously see the world around her, without compromising her invisible nature. My Sharingan sees energy in all its forms and down to the nanoscale, at the cost of needing to focus to do so. I could see her as easily as I can see anyone else. I even expressed that I could do the exact same thing. Hidden leaf formation. Quote, "The class blinked as not only did I become invisible, but so did my clothes and armor I wore. That's totally unfair," she pouted. I poked her forehead, my Sharingan spinning lazily as I snorted. "You can technically do the same thing, Toru. Your quirk isn't invisibility. It's light refraction. If it was true invisibility, you'd be blind as the light would go right through your retinal nerve. You just need to practice trying to change what you can and can't do." She frowned, but nodded hesitantly and thanked me for the advice. As I returned to the visible spectrum, the evening passed uneventfully, and then the next day came with what had been the usual boring morning-long study of the laws and permis. Scions a fully licensed hero possessed in what they could and could not do. Then the interesting time came along once we went on a bus to a weather-based facility designed to test us on disaster response threats. With a very powerful quirk user named 13. Her quirk was Black Hole, the ability to create black holes anywhere on her body. She demonstrated a way to utilize it for good, to absorb rubble. Then things became interesting. A purple smoke covered the room, and a few dozen quirks appeared out of nowhere. A young man with touch disintegration. An older gentleman with gaseous teleportation. Various thugs with minor quirks that frankly didn't matter all that much to me. And a huge being with multiple quirks alongside an exposed brain. The huge thing walked beside the young man. A young man who apparently also had a bunch of detached hands on his face. Pretty hardcore, I have to admit. Perhaps he could control those hands remotely and extend his quirk through those as well as his own skin. Reminded me of the Kagaya clansman I had fought once back in the clan war days. What was his name? Hirojishi. The man had been using the ribs and spines of his enemies to add to his own bone weaponry. Made me smile, remembering those good old days. Nothing but fights and helping my brother. The two of us against the world. My smile dropped after that. The aching pain, the loss of my brother. The sheer cold rage I felt as Tobarama dared to use my brother's likeness against me. Sasuke Uchiha wasn't my descendant. He'd been the great-grandson of my brother, Izuna. Aizawa barked out for everyone to leave, and the training session was cancelled. A few of my classmates were paralyzed with fear. The young man called out. How disappointing. All Might was supposed to be here. The man's voice became cold and dark. Almost manic. Do you think he'll appear if we greet him with the bodies of everyone here? The villains spread out and launched an assault. 13 was about to utilize her quirk. Before I noticed, the gaseous teleportation quirk user had extended his quirk around her body. Within an instant, my Sharingan saw what was going to happen. 13 gasped as she found herself flung onto her back on the ground next to her students. She felt like she just got hit by a truck, and immediately stood back up only to blink as she wasn't sure what she was looking at. The man was gasping for air, his form flickering between gas and physical state. Izuku's hand was outstretched and clamped firmly on what appeared to be a metal collar of sorts. The young man further back scowled. Damn it! Stop interfering. Nomu, kill the brat. The now named Nomu launched forward. Its speed was blisteringly fast as the monster crossed the clearing in less than a second, his fist ray Daita hit Izuku within less than 2 seconds. Izuku flung the half-state man, who immediately teleported away as he fled back to the younger man across the clearing. The Nomu roared as it smashed its fist against Izuku. The impact alone crushed the surrounding ground into dust as the rest of the class screamed for Izuku to dodge. The younger man cackled madly as he relished the first death among many. The dust cleared, only to reveal Izuku was not only unharmed, but unfazed. He dusted off his metallic armor, ignoring the monstrous enemy right next to him as the being struggled to move violently. Bright red seals covered every inch of the being's frame. Then Izuku's hand reached out and grabbed Nomu's exposed brain. For a brief second, it looked like nothing happened, and then the monstrous opponent collapsed. The brain turned into pulp. And then the sheer force hit them all. Every villain and hero struggled to stay on their feet as the cold, endless, nearly psychotic rage hit each and every one of them. Izuku's eyes were bleeding, the black spinning tomo giving way to a design that made everyone's skin crawl. Izuku's voice echoed across the silent clearing. His fists clenched. His voice was flat and yet blistering. You absolute sick fucks. Izuku reached down and grabbed the clearly dead Nomu, and then flung it to the right, where a huge thing appeared. It looked like a gigantic head with ringed eyes. The mouth opening to consume the dead Nomu whole. Izuku paused. I had lived through the worst period in shinobi history. I lived in a time where children were just tools used in an endless war between clans. Where wars were as common as the weekly news. Bodies piled by the dozens. The one thing I could say was at least shinobi kept their blood-filled wars to themselves. Very rarely were civilians ever in those conflicts. It was an unspoken rule that civilians weren't a part of the wars between clans and shinobi. The very few who broke this rule were hunted down and slaughtered. By everyone. Partially because of the fact that civilians were in much higher numbers than shinobi, acting as the farmers and as the supply line for the countries as a whole, and partially because of the fact that to break such an unspoken rule was to say that you had no limits in whom or what you would do. A lawless tyrant with no restraint was frankly too dangerous to be left unchecked. Regardless of where or whom said tyrant came from. My rage and endless fury broke my control as I hissed out in absolute rage. You absolute sick fucks. Her name was Maya. She was 4 years old. She didn't understand why her parents looked so disappointed in her. She didn't understand why everyone picked on her and called her useless. One day she had found herself locked out of her home, and had cried and begged to come in. The house was empty. Her family had abandoned her. She had been found by the doctor. Her family's doctor. The man offered her a place to stay while they found her family. She wished she had never accepted the offer. Years of experimentations. Years of pain and agony as her body was torn apart and put back together wrong. Again and again. The last thing she felt as the endless pain of the doctor messing with her brain, her endless silent begging met with a final relief as a nice older man offered her a way out. She took it gladly. Thank you, Izuku-ne. The brother she wished she had always had. I absolutely snapped. The small part of Izuku's innocence that had believed in the goodness of the modern world was absolutely crushed and buried. Immediately I was aware of something I hadn't anticipated. A new Mangekyo. As Madara, I already possessed the eternal Mangekyo. The abilities of my brother and my own. I hadn't expected or realized that Izuku himself could awaken an ocular ability. My head snapped back, my eyes bleeding as my chakra rushed out of control. My perfect control was shot, my absolute unholy rage snapping to further and further heights. Mokuden clone jutsu. Wooden branches grew out of my left arm, a duplicate of myself appearing. With violent wind bursts, I blasted away the villains from near Aizawa, who had been struggling against the 20 or so individuals. Once the villains were neatly separated from my class and my teachers, my clone popped out of the concrete ground and slammed his hand on the ground. Single point space barrier. A black oval-shaped barrier sealed the whole group of villains inside with me. None could see within the barrier. The younger man, who had been stunned, was frothing with rage. What the fuck, you absolute fucktwat. You destroyed my Nomu. This wasn't supposed to happen. The gaseous teleportation user was horrified as he yelled out. Shigaraki, I can't teleport past this barrier. Clap, clap, clap. The villains flinched, seeing that the young pro-hero-to-be was clapping slowly, coldly, his face set in a flat empty smile with glowing red eyes that promised unholy agony. Congratulations. You've all helped me awaken a new ocular ability that I haven't tested out before, and you all have pissed me off so much that your free trial of life and existence has just expired. Quote. The black Tomo spun and merged, growing into a unique design that sent chills down their spines. Across the world, a single image was repeated that showed the lethality of its contents. A single image hat was now staring them all back in the face. A glowing red biohazard symbol. Two new abilities stood out to me as I felt the power of the new unique ocular abilities inside my eyes. One of which was not something I needed to share right now. The other had far too much potential and fun to be had not to test it out. I gave a cold chuckle, enjoying the rising subtle signs of fear in my opponents' faces. I will relish each and every one of their deaths, although I may keep a few alive, I mused. More puppets to infiltrate the League of Villains. While I am under All Might, and therefore the hero faction, why not branch out and see what the dark side of this world has to offer? Black ashes hissed into existence, collecting into a black mask of undefinable features in my right hand. It was ironic, I mused to myself. Izuku Midoriya always looked up to people. Looked up to his heroes. Looked up to his bully. Looked up at the world that had deemed him beneath their notice and beneath their attention. How fitting then, that Izuku Midoriya gained the power to become anyone that he had seen with his own eyes at any point in his lifetime. That now also included my lifetime, and my eyes had been used long after I was dead as well. How fitting. The black mask fit over my face, and the villains looked horrified to see the figure shifted rapidly, gaining height and mass as the overbearing pressure of the being's presence suffocated them. I really should thank you for giving me back a way for me to return to my original body once more. Even if it's for a limited time. Long white hair flowed down in waves. A similar long cloak of white and black, 9 tomo stitched into the back. Glowing red Rinnegan eyes gazed down upon them all, as a god would look upon insects of the world he had crafted by his own hands. Tamura Shigaraki looked at the floating being in front of him, unaware that the hand covering his face had fallen from the ominous wind that had hit them at the being's creation. He whispered in horror and slight trepidation. What are you? A cold manic smile greeted his question, and a deep laugh echoed through the silence as the being, no, the god, responded. I am Madara Uchiha, the god of this world. The barrier that covered the field, that blocked the view within, was ominous and deadly. No one would go near the barrier, the clone of Izuku. Midoriya informing everyone coldly that to touch the barrier itself would lead to the necrosis of the flesh, able to eviscerate anyone who dared interfere no matter what quirk they possessed. Aizawa barked at the clone. Problem child. You can't just seal yourself in with these villains, especially if they have a teleporting quirk user. You can be expelled for this. The man warned, his red eyes glowing at the clone. The clone's eyes narrowed, the Mangekyo flaring into existence as the wave of pressure hit them all hard. 13 struggled to stay standing, and the rest of the class was surper. ISED to find that they weren't bothered at all. The pressure ignored them. The clone's voice deepened, his voice cold and unyielding. These villains tortured and mutilated a 4-year-old quirkless girl into insanity and experimented on her body until she became the entity they referred to as Nomu. A quick hand sign, and the class flinched to see the illusion of a 4-year-old girl with blonde hair and green eyes. She looked happy and normal at first. Then they all watched in transfixed horror as the illusion showed her becoming sadder and more scared, more bruises and agony, her tears ignored as her flesh was experimented on. They watched in fast forward as the 4-year-old girl's last moments of herself were her looking in the mirror, seeing her huge hulking body alongside her expose. Ed brain as a gloved hand reached through her brain. The way her eyes died out, leaving the familiar emptiness of the Nomu that they had seen when it had first appeared. The illusion vanished. Aizawa shook his head before he barked out. That doesn't mean you have the authority or the right to act alone, Midoriya. There's a due process for this. What if you're overwhelmed or killed? What if this is a diversion while more of them appear and we can't stop them because you're a sitting duck? The man had pushed the images to the back of his mind, wondering how the problem child knew of those things, and more importantly focusing on the fact that despite his powers, Izuku Midoriya is still not a pro-hero. He would be a vigilante and would only ruin the school's reputation alongside the rest of the heroes. Izuku had to realize that there were long-term consequences. The clone's arms crossed, undeterred. If I died due to these villains, I and the barrier itself would vanish. As for being RW helmed or surprised by a pincer maneuver, I doubt it considering these villains had brought themselves all in here expecting All Might. As for my consequences, the clone's voice trailed off, before the pressure hit Aizawa full on, making him stumble slightly as the clone's eyes glowed in the afternoon sun. I don't care. If you wish to expel me, by all means. If you wish to arrest me, go ahead and try. The clone's voice was spoken solemnly, but the pressure grew. Like a silent match of wills, the clone seemed to stare down Aizawa like a lord over their subordinate rather than a student against one's teacher. Another illusion appeared, showing the dead bodies of his siblings strewn on the battlefield, his home in flames, his father's butchered body back from a Senju raid, his younger brother's head decapitated, with missing eyes, and his youngest and only sister, her 5-year-old body dissected in half. These eyes carry the history of a clan long dead, either fictional or real, I don't know. But be aware that it will require my death for me to willingly allow them to act unpunished. That can be arranged. The new voice was cold, dark, and made everyone's skin crawl. The coldness of death hit them all. And most of the class fainted, even as Aizawa and 13 swerved to see a large man walking calmly toward them. His face was covered by a breathing respirator. No eye sockets were visible. Aizawa's eyes widened in fear as he saw what was impossible. You should be dead, Aizawa whispered in horror. All for one chuckled. Tales of my death were greatly exaggerated. All for one turned to the clone. Release Tamura, Shigaraki and Kurogiri or I will kill each of your classmates, your teachers, and you. I could care less for the fodder. The man's voice was hardened. His hand outstretched toward the class. Lightning sparking dangerously. Silence. Both Aizawa and 13 struggled, wondering if they'd be able to move. 13 debated using her quirk, but the fact that this was the man that gave All Might a struggle, meant that she might even do more harm for her actions. Where was All Might? All for one's hand sparked dangerously for less than a moment before the electricity fired out in a plasma beam toward the class. Only there wasn't a sound of impact, and All for one could still sense the heartbeats of the class students. He turned toward the scene. A black cloak with red clouds shifted very slightly in the breeze. Glowing purple ringed eyes stared down at All for one with contempt. A deep voice echoed from the man with red hair. Conan, take away the young ones. The fluttering sound of paper was a distinct but odd sound. Only All for one noted that he could sense what was easily hundreds of thousands of paper floating around the air, tagging and wrapping around each student, each of whom instantly fell unconscious. Aizawa and 13 didn't even get a chance to respond, already tagged and taken from the area. With his hostages now taken by another individual, All for one was both frustrated and amused. He could always find another pawn, another false son, another villain to nurture. But Tamura had been specially designed to break All Might's will. Well, if I cannot use his legacy to break him, then I suppose I'll return to my original plan of informing him exactly how the quirk he passes on works, he mused darkly to himself as he ignored the clone entirely. The barrier that surrounded his apprentice and the group of villains also blocked off the clone, which likely meant the clone could not intervene. And yet All for one wondered darkly how he had once again met two very powerful meta-humans with no quirk presence. May I know the name of the person I intend to absolutely crush? He asked calmly, hundreds of quirks flickering to the forefront of his mind as his power grew. The red-haired cloaked figure didn't even bother to scowl or show a reaction. Shame, he thought to himself. Their last expressions always brought him joy. Nagato Uzumaki, first disciple of God, leader of the Akatsuki. All for one struck, the earth moving like water around the man from behind into pillars, surprised to find the earth was shoved away by an invisible force field. Barrier. He moved forward, his fist launching forward as he combined energy nullification, physical impact, lightning strike. All of which was instantly blocked by a pale hand grabbing his fist. All for one noted, frustratingly, that he could feel the power of his quirks were somehow being negated by this individual. Quirk suppression shouldn't be possible on him. Glowing purple ringed eyes stared at him down, the man's face passive as he spoke. Almighty push. All for one was blown across the clearing, barely stopping with the barrier inches behind him. I thought heroes weren't in it for the murder. He asked amusedly. Nagato shrugged. I'm not a hero. The red-haired man gave a small dark grin at the number one villain. I'm a shinobi. All for one dodged to the left instantly. His quirks screaming at him as black fire exploded into existence where he had been standing. The air shifted slightly, as another individual stood next to Nagato. Black hair with glowing red eyes gazing at all for one with a cold expression. Itachi, why is it your Amaterasu always misses its target? Nagato joked to his partner. The man, now identified as Itachi, shrugged. The point is to intimidate the threat, not kill him. He is useful for keeping a hold on the criminal organizations while Akatsuki has worked in the shadows. He noted coldly. All for one laughed now. His dry cold chuckle echoing in the air. Not a hero organization after all. Then what are your goals? Surely we can come to an accord. He asked confidently. Nagato shook his head. The goal of Akatsuki is none of your concern. He said coldly. All for one sighed with frustration. I came here solely to get my students. Nothing more. Why show yourselves now? Neither of the two, shinobi, as they coined themselves, spoke after his frustrated statement, and all for one decided that he was tired of being on the backseat. Powerful though they were nothing compared to All Might. Dodge. He threw himself hard toward the ground and used his rare quirks of teleportation to fling himself across the clearing once more. The earth cracked apart, shaking vastly as a blur slammed hard into the ground where all for one had been standing. The very air whistled and cracked loudly, a sonic boom that soon gave way to a rush of heat and sound around the area. All for one roared in fury and frustration at this point. The very air crackled as his voice boomed. What the hell is it now? Who else thinks they can stand in my way? The dust and ash from the resulting air drop slowly faded. I am here. All for one knew that if the breathing apparatus hadn't forced his lungs to breathe, he'd have stopped breathing. It was not All Might standing in front of him. All for one had wondered what would happen if All Might had fallen, if he had embraced the full capacity in darkness that One for All could really do. If he had stopped pretending to be a goddamn symbol of peace. He had his answer. The standard costume All Might wore was soaked in blood. The only visible features were the glowing blue pinpricks filled with hate. The quirks that had been held back for so long because of his need to be a hero. To restrict himself so as to not scar the very public he sought to keep safe, were fully in effect. Black smoke swirled together, emitted by the skin that began to forcefully unscar and heal the man's injuries, reversing the deadly blows he himself had placed on him decades ago. Electric energy flared into existence, the very air smelling like ozone as the man's own internal organs began to fuel the extreme regeneration as the fallen symbol took his first deep breath in decades. It should have been impossible. None of the quirks gained by One for All should have been capable of this feat. Did you figure out what One for All does when you pass it on to another? What did it do when it was passed on to you? All for One said quietly, confidently. The smoke slowly faded, leaving All Might standing silently, his blue pinpricks full of hatred and scorn as he stood still, as if waiting for the answer. Energy must come from somewhere. Stockpiled energy must be stored somewhere. So how does One for All get stronger between generations? Why does my brother's quirk put such a burden on the bodies of those that come after him? Why is the energy so intense that the users train themselves until they break just to hold a fraction of its energy? All for One gave a cold chuckle, a single sarcastic bark of laughter as All Might's face twitched slightly as his old enemy suddenly had to think about it. The energy is stored in the soul, all might. There is no afterlife for those who hold one for all. Each time my brother's quirk is passed down, their express variances and lives are boiled down and destroyed, converted as an extra reserve of energy to be used by the next. You killed your teacher and every single person before her in exchange for a few decades of a false peace. He finished coldly, hatefully. Only, All Might didn't react. The man blinked once, and then gave a short barked laugh. Then he busted into full belly laughing, falling to the ground on his knees as he began howling with laughter until tears fell from his eyes. Why are you laughing? All for One felt chills going down his spine as All Might stood back up from his laughter. The man's body and face rippling as if covered in an invisible pool of water. Wake up to reality. Nothing goes as planned in this cursed world. The barrier vanished behind All for One, and the presence. The endless abyss. Darkness beyond darkness. Source. Infinite. Eternal. All for One had collected many quirks. Many abilities. Nothing could ever compare. His senses were screaming at him. To run. To hide. Take your pathetic student and leave. I'm feeling merciful today. The god of the abyss said quietly, the eyes of God looking down upon him. All for One had lost his eyes long ago. For that he was grateful. It amplified his other senses. He would have considered this a true god if not for the ever so slight wavering of the energy inside the being before him. Whatever power Izuku was tapping into had a time limit. Regardless, he easily grabbed Tamura Shigaraki and had Kumogiri open a gate to a random location instead of the hideout. Goodbye, Izuku Midoriya. All for One prided himself on being polite. Evil did not need to be animalistic. All for One didn't notice that there was something else that had noticed what was going on and had followed him silently in his shadow. Mother, Chakra is returning to the world again. Soon I'll have another chance to revive you. Thanks for watching.